Y'all need me?
Hold on.
It still says waiting.
Yeah, there's always a delay. I'm filming this with tech stuff. Astronomy. Just letting you know in case she says anything. Like I fixed her projector for her, helping her with lots of tech things.
Who?
Miss Lofton, subbing.
What is she doing wrong? I don't understand. She only has problems every other day.
I know. First period.
Is it Morgan's room?
Mm-hmm. So just let you know.
Because his computer works perfectly fine. We have done everything on his computer with his login, and it works perfectly fine.
So,
and she doesn't complain about the other
I
one.
know. So whatever's going on is there. I'm able to fix it each time. It shouldn't be muted.
I just want to make sure while you're having this conversation. So what do you do when you go in there? I mean, what?
Like the first time it wasn't plugged in. The entire projector was unplugged. I know.
But is she having problems logging in and getting the player
YouTube
to work
to play
again?
and stuff? Yeah. So just letting you know. I help her when I can.
Thank you. Nobody had said anything since we came back from the break, so I just assumed everything.
She just calls my room and I go next door and help. You're welcome. All right, sorry about that, guys. So we are talking about helping students to collaborate and communicate. I am Amy Davis, and moderating for us is Amy Lehman. Hi. I don't know if they can see you. I think it's just sharing my screen right now.
I think so too.
So I am a math teacher. I teach the dual credit pre-cal and dual credit calculus at Lakeview Centennial. I'm also our veteran I3. And then the other Amy teaches.
I teach AP US History and AP World History, and I also help run our student tech team, which is the digital militia for Lakeview. And I am our new I3.
Yes. And we are going to be focusing on how we can encourage our students to form study groups. Virtual study groups are ideal because it means transportation is not an issue, but study groups in general are just very helpful for students to learn and retain information. Anything to add, Amy?
You covered it.
All right. So this webinar is aligned to ISTE Standards 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7. And that probably doesn't mean much to anybody who memorizes what the ISTE standards are, right? So the first one is called Empowered Learner. That means that their students are encouraged to structure their own learning, to make their own goals, and work towards them. So having a study group for this helps them to create those deadlines for their own groups and make sure that they're on track with what's going on. Did we solve this problem? Do we need to go and get more help? That kind of stuff.
And for those of you who are more worried about things like college readiness and stuff, it also is one of those things that is just one of those tried and true methods for students who are getting ready to go to college and who that is their go-to. They know that's where they're going in life. So it's one of those things that's going to be setting them up for not only college, but also the workforce, because we know we work in a district where collaborating on our own is really important, because not all of us at this point in our lives have things like planned PLC time.
Right. ISTE standard number 2 is called Digital Citizen. And that means that we need to make sure the students are staying positive while they're online. They're aware that anything that they post, if they're doing their virtual study groups, never actually goes away. And they need to make sure that they're being mindful of everything that is out there, everyone who has access. Standard 3 is called the Knowledge Constructor. So we need to help make sure the students are actively researching using technology for solutions and concepts to the material at hand, whether it's looking into cultures for their history classes, looking up for some clarification on theorems in their math or science classes, trying to figure out how to analyze the book or the essay in their English class, whatever the case may be. They might even go and look around what's going on in the culture for their language classes.
Absolutely.
Standard 6 is called the Creative Communicator, and that's when they use technology to communicate. So we're going to be focusing on FaceTime, Google Hangouts, Skype, Google Groups. I've also had students that have used Snapchat for it. So there are so many different platforms they can use.
And the kids are always going to be a step ahead of us We're just giving them a more organized way to do it because they are always going to know kind of what's up and coming. Like I know for a long time my kids were on Kick before we ever knew what Kick was. So we're just trying to give them a way to be organized and have us have the potential to participate with them.
Exactly. ISTE Standard 7 is called the Global Collaborator, and that means that the students are collaborating with others worldwide. And Skype is a great help with this for education. They have the Skype experts that you can work with and communicate with over the internet from anywhere in the world. And then we also have Mystery Classroom that students can do with other students during class time, and they can ask each other questions and learn about the cultures and everything of wherever that classroom is located and try to guess, well, where are you? Kind of like a where in the world is Carmen Sandiego for this year, this group of kids.
And I think what I want to add is just we want to be outside the box as educators. Both of us teach AP classes, and the AP teachers have huge communities on things like Facebook even. And I know that Discovery Education has their DEN community on Facebook. And educators seem to have a huge community to reach out to on Twitter. So we're never alone in what we're trying to do. So even if you don't necessarily know who you can reach out to do those things, you can look in things that you're using every day because, as the kids say, Facebook is for older people. So you can reach out into some of the things, the technologies you're already using for your own social media to find those things for your students.
Exactly. And we also need to make sure that the students are mindful of digital safety, security, and rights and responsibilities. So they need to make sure they're being smart on the internet. And as I was looking into the different platforms for our webinars, for this webinar, I found this great quote regarding digital safety and security that I'm going to share with you. It says that with everything, there are rules. So as educators, we need to instill the values of responsibility, respect, and integrity in our students when acquiring material or communicating in the digital sense. Students should be required to follow the acceptable use policy of your school district that details how to be digitally respectful in and out of the classroom setting. And I found that on a digital citizenship Google site from D. Ferris, and the link is going to be at the end of our webinar. But I just thought that that explained so well why the students need to be smart on the internet. They know that they're not supposed to plagiarize from the textbook or from the actual book that they get from the library. But if they find it on the internet, they're like, oh, it's open source, it's public domain, I can use this. But it's not always the case. So they just need to make sure they're being very smart about it. So you've probably realized by now that you are using the ISTE standards without even realizing it. So I always like to make sure everyone remembers that you might not think about it, but it's always there. So just thinking of study groups in general, they create a support system for the students so they don't have to struggle along, suffer in silence and everything. They get to work with other classmates or maybe someone that's taken the same class, but they're in a different class period, or they're even at a different school and they're going over the same material, they're learning the same curriculum. They can help each other and explain in ways that might seem very convoluted to us, but make sense in their teenage minds.
And I think that it's also, we always say as teachers that if you can teach someone else the material, then you know that you know the material. So I think that's also the important thing to know as you're setting up study groups is if a kid can teach somebody else the material, then they know the material. So while they don't set out in their study groups to be teaching each other, that tends to be what happens.
Exactly. And they get to share information or strategies that made it easier for them so that it might help us, one of their friends, and just working with each other and collaborating and playing off of each other. It just makes the learning more fun. So when we talk about study groups, you always have to think of, is it better to be face-to-face? Is it better to have a virtual study group? It's really and truly your personal preference. Face-to-face does require some intense scheduling and transportation, especially as the students get higher up in their education and are involved in more extracurricular activities like football, cheer, the drill teams, band, all of that. That requires them to be here after school. If they're part of the digital team, our digital leadership team for the students, that requires the parents having to make sure that they can get them to whatever extra location and make sure all the times coordinate.
And I think we just work in a district where we have open attendance zones that it just makes it harder. We have kids, especially at our school, where the students are coming from all over the district, and it makes it harder. You can't just go down to the Starbucks down the street and expect that all of your kids can be there and be ready to go, because they're in 3 different cities for us. So it makes it really difficult and really hard for things like that to happen when you're looking at a district like this. And we're also working with districts who are low income kids. So they aren't as likely to have a car as they were 10 years ago when I graduated from this district. They're less likely to be able to provide their own transportation even when they're old enough and they have a driver's license.
Or as they get older, they're watching younger siblings to save parents money from having to have a babysitter or someone.
Or working themselves.
Or they have their own jobs, exactly. So doing a virtual study group opens up more opportunities for these students to get to have this study group experience.
And we're also going to be talking about some of those virtual options that still allow for the face-to-face, but virtually, because technology has changed so much that you can still look at someone's face and still be talking to them, especially with some of the new iOS updates.
Exactly. And if you're doing a virtual study group, you just have to make sure that you are all on the same page platform-wise, and you all have that same time. Virtual study groups do, allow you, as long as 2 people are communicating, then you can just jump in and jump out. It's kind of like our district Twitter chats. We can jump in and jump out if we need to. So it is opening up more and more possibilities. This is a picture of one of my face-to-face students when they were doing a study group a few weeks ago at the local Starbucks. And they sent me a picture and email when they were asking for some clarification as well. So students, when they're in study groups, are also more willing to ask those guiding questions of the teacher, because it's like, well, now it's a group. It's not just I'm by myself. I'm going to feel like you're, mad at me for asking a question type thing.
And I think that the setting outside the classroom also helps as well. I know in my former district, the district was really open to the idea of us being able to meet with the kids outside of the school day in other locations. So I always had once a month a session at the local IHOP or the local Starbucks, whatever the kids picked. And we just all showed up with our textbooks every Saturday that month that was selected. And we would have an AP study session to gear up for the exam. And I think just getting outside of the classroom and getting in a setting where they feel more comfortable and more relaxed also helps. Just like we feel more relaxed in another situation, getting called down to our boss's office isn't a comfortable situation. But if we see them in a hallway and we just say hello, we're relaxed and more comfortable with them.
Exactly. And if we're in the study group setting, then it's going to foster that peer tutoring and those impromptu discussions over the material. I was talking with parents a few weeks ago through conferences, and one of my parents commented that their daughter was arguing through FaceTime with another student back and forth about a calculus assignment. And they went back and forth and helped each other and discussed and had these long drawn out, topics and everything else. And when they finally hung up, she's like, well, my husband just looked at her and it's like, you sounded smart. So they're having these discussions and they're learning outside of the classroom, and it's making them retain the material so much better. And I know in my calculus class, I put my students in group seating. So we are always, when we have class activities, we're doing kind of mini study groups during the class day. And it's helping them to get that collaboration and get that discussion in.
We sit in groups in my class as well so that they can have that conversation, even if it's not meant to be a group activity. So that even if it's just a warm up that they're supposed to be completing on their own, they can still have that conversation about that topic, so that it's just set up to just facilitate that naturally.
And I know we're a NIMSY school, so the NIMSY Saturday sessions also foster these study group activities. And once the second semester hits, I know from my AP class, I encourage them to choose one day after school where it's just calculus only. And my calculus kids can come in if they need help. And on that one day, it's just after school tutoring for calculus. So we have like a larger study group type setting. And I can be one of the ones in charge. Or the kids can have discussions with me and we can bounce back and forth. And it's been very successful the last few years since I've been doing that. Do you have anything like that in your history classes?
I actually tend to bring other people in. So a lot of my former teachers are still in our district, and they will come in and host the study groups for them just so that they can, because it's history and everybody kind of has perspective, and part of history is perspective. So I tend to bring in other people to help host my study groups as an alternative to that, just to help with the discussion and bring in different viewpoints, because part of my class is those viewpoints. And while I don't look like my students and have the same background as my students, neither do my teachers. And so it just kind of helps bring in background and different experiences.
Okay. So when we're talking about the virtual study group options for platforms, one of the first ones, and the ones that a lot of our students will choose because they have their own iPhones and everything, is to do FaceTime. Now, yes, we have iPads for the high school students, but they don't have FaceTime on the student iPads.
That being said, they can FaceTime with you on your iPad. So if they have an iPhone, they can use your school email address.
In theory, perhaps, or not. Okay, well, I'm going to continue talking about our different platforms, even though y'all can't see what I'm seeing on the screen. Hopefully it comes back. So FaceTime is very helpful when you have multiple people that are using the iPhones. And if you have the newest iOS, then you can do the group chats as long as everyone has that update. And of course, some of my calculus students have used FaceTime this year. Some of them have FaceTimed with me through my district credentials this past year. I've even worked with some coworker students or children through FaceTime to help them learn Algebra 2 and pre-cal material.
We FaceTime my whole class in for my homebound students. I will literally FaceTime in the hospital and just leave it up for the whole class.
And I've even had, when we're doing group presentations, and one of my students was at a track meet, we FaceTimed her while she was sitting on the sidelines waiting for her turn to run. And she got to present with her group through FaceTime. So FaceTime is very helpful. It's not as convenient since the kids can't use their district devices for it, but it is still one of the great platforms that we have. Now, I asked some of my students, past and present, for feedback about study groups and how they felt it was helpful. So one of my students told me that it's a great tool for learning from our peers. Calculus is one of their more difficult classes in regards to material. So without study groups, they say that their understanding of derivatives would not be as complete. And then they name one of their friends, Jordan Nash. He's like, he has the ability to grasp the problems much faster. So he explains it for him, and then this student interprets it for the others around him. And he's like, that's the beauty of study groups. The collective group gains knowledge together. And I loved that last sentence. The collective group gains knowledge together. So my kids know I'm sharing this with you. They gave me permission. So we're all good. Another platform is Google Hangouts. And that's actually what we're using right now for this webinar. I'm sharing the screen with you if it's working yet. Apparently not.
But we do have sound.
But we have sound, yay! So with Google Hangouts, they can use multiple devices. So they can pull it up on the Chrome app on their iPhone. They can pull it up on an Android phone, whatever.
And Apple devices do have an app available to use as well.
Okay. And can we use our district devices on it? I don't believe the students can.
Students cannot, teachers can.
Yeah. So the students would still have to use their personal devices, but it does allow them to do the face-to-face if they just use the camera feature, or to share different slides or pictures of their assignments
and there is
talk
a
about it.
chat-only feature. just like we all grew up with AOL Instant Messenger, there is a chat feature just like that. So students, if you are in classes and you just want them to have like a back channel, so to speak, they could also use this as their back channel during your classes even. So that's my favorite feature about Google Hangouts is you can go back and forth between a chat in and of itself using text, or you can use the FaceTime feature of it.
So I'm trying to get off of the screen share to see if maybe y'all can at least just see us so you're not looking at just black nothingness. Give me a second. Hopefully you'll get the picture in a little bit once the lag happens. So Google Hangouts are good and helpful. So it's another platform option. And I know y'all won't be able to see it, but I did have another student quote about it. And they said the study groups are really helpful because they're either in need of help trying to figure out a problem, or that student would be the one that actually knows what they're doing and can help someone else. So with someone helping them, they're able to get a better understanding of whatever question. And then by explaining a problem, that helps them go through it more slowly and make sure that they haven't made any mistakes themselves. So it is a good way to like have a reflection and that, did I do this right? Am I following every single step as they go through? Google Hangouts does have the chat and the video part. You can video chat up to 10 people. And it does allow for the screen sharing. Hopefully that it's supported through your Wi-Fi and it doesn't go down like today. And allows it to, be helpful if you're trying to solve equations or look at balancing a scientific equation type thing. The student emails won't let the students actually use this Google feature, so they do have to use their personal accounts, but it is still very helpful. And most of our students, I believe, have personal Google accounts anyway. So it's another option. Our third platform is Skype. And you can use any kind of device on it. So they can have Android, they can have Apple, they can have the Windows phones and everything else. Or they can have their own personal laptops if that's what they're using. And it is helpful. So within the Skype, you can communicate with experts in the field. I've had several engineers that are at aerospace locations that are about an hour away from here. Instead of having them drive all the way out here during their lunch break or something, talk for about 10 minutes and then go back to work, I have them do it through Skype, because then all they have to do is take 10 minutes out of their lunch and they can talk about it, explain, answer questions that the students might have during the class period, and then they can go right back to what they were doing. So it's convenient.
And Skype itself has a lot of great educator resources out there. They've set up mystery Skypes that you can have. They have Skype field trips available to you. So if you just go up and look up the Skype for Education stuff, they have resources available to you for you to be able to use at any time. So if you just go looking and you get stuck, they have what you might need.
Exactly. And having access to those experts and all of those different resources allows the students to broaden their own horizons. They can see, well, how would you use this with the aerospace? How could we use this maybe in the medical field? And then they can add to their PLNs every single time they do that. So it's very helpful. The last platform that we're going to talk about today is Google Groups. Now, this is a new platform that Google is offering to us. And it allows you to create a group and then share files, as well as have forum with multiple threads. Everyone can change their own email settings for the group functions, so they're not bombarded with email after email. I know we can't use, the students have to have a teacher create the group for them before they can actually use their district credentials, but it is helpful to have this opportunity as well. They can share all those files, and it is very beneficial for the students when they're doing their group work or checking each other's work back and forth. Did I do this right? Did I follow all these steps correctly? And I have another response from some students about study groups. This student said that she loves study groups, and it's just sometimes hard with the amount of homework teachers assign to find the time to meet up and for all of us to focus on one thing. But when she has met up and done homework with her friends and tried to understand concepts, she doesn't feel the pressure of the classroom setting. And since they're her friends, she feels like she can ask any question and not feel stupid. And she always leaves feeling 10 times smarter. So she thinks that study groups are great. So if we can open up more of our students' desires and encourage them to get into those study groups and do it face-to-face or do it virtually, then we're helping them to broaden their horizons and gain a deeper and better understanding of the curriculum at hand.
I like the idea of the Google Groups because I think it's a more realistic idea and look at what their online classes are going to look like in college. It's not exactly the same format, but if they ever take an online course for a job or in college, it's going to be a forum looking thing, and it's going to have a Dropbox for files and things like that. So it gives them a realistic expectation of what they're getting themselves into if they take an online course. It's exactly what any of my online courses looked at for both undergrad and my graduate degrees. So I kind of like that aspect of it. My kids who are using some of those things like that as well.
So, do we have any questions? I know I've asked some of my coworkers in my department if they had any questions regarding study groups, and they gave me 2 of them. So one of the questions they asked me was, how do you get students interested in starting these groups? So I've always given towards the final exam starting time, so right about now, an extra credit opportunity for all of my students leading up and making sure that they show proof that they've been in a study group, that they're, taking pictures of it, they have logs, whatever. And then I also have parents sign off on it so that the parent understands what we're doing. And it has explanation within it saying, yes, my child met, all these kids, they're all listed, they've all signed on at the local Starbucks, and they use this and they're there for 5 hours one Saturday afternoon or whatever. And the pictures are helpful. They're turning in all the work and everything. So it has to be related to my class, whether it's the test review, whether it's homework, or they're just going through their notes and they have pictures of them doing that. The kids love taking selfies. Let them take a selfie in the study group. Like you saw in the very beginning, that picture of those 3 kids.
I do it a whole lot more informally. I practice the open door policy. My kids know that they are welcome in my room anytime. So for example, I, on B days, have a 3rd period class. Lots and lots of my kids come eat lunch in that class and sit through that class. And so they're getting extra class time, and they're getting, when I have a chance to step away from that class while they are doing independent work, to be able to ask me questions and to ask them questions and to participate with kids they don't normally see. And after school, my room is just an open revolving door of kids who I had last year, or their friends, or kids who little siblings. It's a group of kids who just need a home after school to come do things. There's a kid in the room with us right now who just needs a home, and they can work on whatever they need to work on. So they could be doing Miss Davis's calculus work in my room. They could be doing economics in my room. It really doesn't matter. And so I teach a variety of things, like I'm sure a lot of our teachers do. Mm-hmm. I know Miss Davis has attempted to help them with my work, and it's all okay because they're still getting different perspectives and they're still studying in a group with people who they don't normally study with. And that's really our goal.
Right. I know last year we had a debate about a timed writing during my tutoring times, and the student came back about a week later and she's like, thank you, Miss Davis. All that discussion and all those ideas that we're going through helped me to write it, and that I was able to get a passing grade on that assignment when I was freaking out because I didn't know how to start.
And I've had a kid who has stayed after school going, I need help with this math problem. My teacher isn't available. And we've literally gotten on FaceTime with my dad, who has a mathematics degree. And my dad has walked them through the problem because we couldn't get a hold of a math teacher in our building. And so I said, let's just figure it out. Here's a resource I have. And we worked it out on my board because I don't have those math skills.
So, and then the other question my department asked was, what other platforms are out there? So last year I had 9 students in calculus, and they created a class-wide Snapchat, where all they did was snap a quick picture and they had a discussion about it. So they could all benefit from the discussion if they tuned in. And we also have all the collaboration aspects on Google Docs and Google Slides, so they can work that way through the different comments. And if they share it with the teacher, then the teacher can also see. And that could count during that extra credit opportunity as their documentation and their proof, their logs, if you will, of their study group time. And
really and truly,
Facebook is also, even though they think it's for the old people, Facebook is also a platform option.
I think really and truly you could use any of the Google platforms, because now you have the chat feature in Google Docs and Google Slides and any of those things, and you could literally just pull up a Google Doc and start typing. So really any of the Google platforms you could technically use and use well. They have Google Docs available to them, so they could just keep a running one or keep a Google Slide going.
On any of the district devices.
They could use chat. All of those things work. And like I said earlier, a couple of years ago, my kids were using Kick, and we had class-wide Kicks. So all of my first period kids things. We're both very techy, both in our classrooms and out of our classrooms.
Yep.
Power of the Amy's. So
yes,
both
it's
of our
Amy
Twitters,
squared. We're gonna take over the world.
Yes, we are. So I guess we should give out our Twitter since they can't see our Twitters.
Yeah. So you can follow me for the math stuff on Twitter with @MissADDAVI.
And I'm at Layman History. And then you can follow our tech kids at the LC Digmil, LCDIGMIL.
Yep.
And they are really great at posting all of the tech things too.
Yes, we have a great tech team. They were even during our technology day teaching other teachers how to use technology. So it was great. They're a great group of kids. So, well, thank you for watching our webinar. Sorry we had so many tech issues, but hopefully you were able to get some ideas and can think of ways to implement study groups, either face-to-face or virtual study groups in your classroom.